The sound of a silver fork hitting a crystal glass shouldn't sound like a gavel, but that night, it did. It was a sharp, high-pitched ping that cut through the low murmur of the steakhouse. I sat at the far end of the table, nursing a glass of water because I knew better than to order the wine Victor, my father, was pouring. The tablecloth was white linen, stark against my hands. I kept them under the table, folded in my lap. My knuckles were still stained with walnut wood stain, and there was a small, healing cut on my thumb from a chisel slip earlier that morning. In this room, surrounded by tailored suits and manicured nails, my hands looked like they belonged to a different species. "Attention, everyone," Victor said, his voice booming with that jovial, commanding tone he reserved for audiences. He stood up, swirling his Cabernet. "Tonight isn't just about Colton and the lovely Paige getting engaged. It's about legacy." Colton, my older brother, leaned back in his chair, grinning. He looked expensive. He always did. His suit was Italian, his teeth were veneered, and his watch cost more than my work truck. Beside him, Paige beamed, her hand resting on his forearm, completely unaware that the man she was marrying was essentially a hollow shell painted with gold leaf. To help the happy couple start their life on the right footing, Victor continued, his eyes finally sliding toward me. They were cold, expectant. "Sloane has graciously agreed to transfer the deed of the Victorian estate to them. A wedding gift, from sister to brother." The air left my lungs. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. I looked at my mother, Deidre. She was busy cutting her filet mignon, not meeting my eyes, a tight, rehearsed smile plastered on her face. "What?" I whispered. "It's perfect, really," Colton said, his voice smooth, bypassing my shock entirely. "Thanks, sis. We were talking about it on the drive over. The location is great, but the house itself is a bit dusty. We'll probably knock down that old garden in the back for a pool. Paige loves to swim." The room felt like it was tilting. They weren't asking. They were informing. "I didn't agree to that," I said. My voice was low, but in the sudden silence of our table, it carried. Victor's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. "Don't be dramatic, Sloane. It's a family asset. Colton needs a primary residence to secure his financing for the new venture. You can move back into the guest cottage at our place. It's plenty of space for a single woman." "I bought that house," I said, my voice shaking slightly, not from fear, but from a sudden, rising heat in my chest. "I bought it with my own money. I spent 5 years restoring it. It's not a family asset. It's mine." Deidre kicked me under the table. Hard. A sharp heel to the shin. "Sloane," she hissed, leaning in, the smell of her expensive perfume cloying and sweet. "Stop making a scene. We are celebrating. Do not ruin this for your brother." "I'm not ruining anything," I said, standing up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. "I'm just not giving him my house." "Sit down," Victor commanded. It wasn't a request. "No," I said. Colton chuckled, shaking his head like I was a toddler throwing a tantrum. "Come on, Sloane. You know you're just holding on to it. It's too much house for you anyway. What do you need 4 bedrooms for? Your tools." "Yes," I said. "Actually, yes." I dropped my napkin on the table. It covered the stain on the linen where I'd spilled a drop of water. "Congratulations on the engagement, Paige. Run while you can." I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard Victor's voice, loud enough for me to hear, trying to smooth over the crack I'd just put in their perfect picture. "She's just emotional. She'll come around. She always does." The valet looked at me with pity as he pulled my truck up to the curb. It was a 2015 Ford, dented on the left side, the bed filled with tarps and a ladder. It roared to life with a rattle that embarrassed me when I was younger, but now sounded like reliability. It was the only honest thing in that parking lot, surrounded by Mercedes and Teslas. I threw myself into the cab, slamming the door to shut out the world. My hands were shaking. I gripped the steering wheel, staring at my knuckles, white against the worn leather. She always does. That was the line that stuck. That was the script they had been reading for my entire life. I drove out of the city, toward the older district where the streetlights were dimmer and the trees grew thicker. As the miles put distance between me and the steakhouse, the memories started to bleed in. It wasn't just tonight. It was the pattern. The architecture of my family was built on a foundation of Colton's wants and my sacrifices. I remembered being 16. Colton was 19, home from college for the summer. He'd thrown a party while Victor and Deidre were in Cabo. It got out of hand. Someone put a fist through the drywall in the living room, a jagged hole right next to the fireplace. Colton had panicked. He was crying, actually crying, terrified that Dad would cut off his allowance. "Fix it, Sloan. Please. You're good at art stuff. Please." And I did. I spent 2 days learning how to patch drywall from YouTube videos. I sanded, I primed, I feather painted the texture to match the existing wall perfectly. When our parents came home, they never noticed. Colton got away with it. I got a thank you that consisted of him letting me drive his car to the gas station to fill it up for him. That was the lesson: my value is in cleaning up the mess. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from Deidre. I didn't look at it, but I knew what it would say. Guilt. Shame. Duty. I thought about Nana Rose. She was the only one who didn't look at me like a utility. She died when I was 22. She had left a significant trust fund. Or so we thought. But when the will was read, Victor explained, with solemn, regretful eyes, that the market had been cruel, that bad investments had wiped it out years ago. There was nothing left but her old journals and a box of jewelry that Deidre immediately claimed. "It's for the best," Victor had said then. "Money ruins character, Sloan. You'll learn to work hard. Like us. Like them." Victor hadn't worked a real day in 20 years. He moved money around, sat on boards, and played golf. So I worked. I took the grief and the anger and I put it into wood. I found the Victorian house 5 years ago. It was a carcass then. Condemned. The roof was caving in, the porch was rotted through, and the neighborhood kids called it the haunted house. I bought it for $150,000, every cent I had saved from working 3 jobs. My parents laughed when I showed them the listing. A money pit, Victor had sneered. "You're throwing your life away on garbage." They didn't see what I saw. They saw rot. I saw bones. Good bones. I turned onto my street. The streetlights flickered here, casting long shadows. And there it was. My house. It wasn't a carcass anymore. It was breathing. I pulled into the driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires familiar and grounding. The porch light was on, a warm yellow glow against the deep blue siding I had painted by hand, hanging off a ladder in the heat of July. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment in the silence. They wanted this. They wanted the one thing I had built without their help. The one thing that proved I was more than just their cleanup crew. And the terrifying part. They truly believed they could just take it. I unlocked the front door, original oak, stripped of 6 layers of paint and restained a deep mahogany, and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. It's a specific scent, a mix of cedar dust, lemon oil, and old plaster. To anyone else, it might smell like a construction site, but to me, it smelled like safety. It smelled like autonomy. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. I navigated by memory and the moonlight spilling through the leaded glass windows I had spent 3 months restoring. Every pane of glass had been removed, cleaned, and re-leaded. My fingers ghosted over the wainscoting in the hallway. I walked to the staircase. This was my masterpiece. When I bought the place, the banister was missing sections, chewed away by termites and neglect. I had source period correct oak, turned the spindles myself on a lathe in the garage, and color matched the stain. I ran my hand up the rail. Smooth as silk. No splinters. I'm not giving you up, I whispered to the empty house. It felt like the house was listening. The floorboards creaked in response, a settling sound, like a heavy sigh. I went into the kitchen, soapstone countertops, reclaimed heart pine floors, and poured a glass of cheap wine. I sat on the floor, leaning against the cabinets. My phone buzzed again. And again. It was vibrating against the hardwood like an angry insect. I finally picked it up. 3 missed calls from Victor. 5 texts from Deidre. Deidre, 9:45 p.m. You embarrassed us. Paige is crying. Deidre, 9:50 p.m. Don't be selfish, Sloan. Your brother is in trouble. He needs the equity. We can't liquidate our assets right now, the market is down. Deidre, 10:15 p.m. Answer your father. I stared at the screen. He needs the equity. That was the truth, hidden in the guilt trip. Colton wasn't just starting a life, he was drowning. I knew the signs. I'd seen him pacing at family gatherings, taking hushed phone calls, sweating when he shouldn't be. The new venture Victor talked about was probably a hole Colton had dug himself into, likely gambling or some crypto scheme he didn't understand. And because Victor and Deidre were illiquid, code for living paycheck to paycheck on a massive scale to maintain appearances, they needed a fresh source of cash. Me. My house. My sweat equity. The house was currently appraised at $850,000. I had turned a wreck into a landmark. And they looked at it and saw an ATM machine. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, heavier than the physical fatigue of sanding floors all day. It was the crushing weight of realization that they would cannibalize me to keep Colton warm. I stood up and walked to the back door, looking out at the overgrown garden Colton wanted to pave over for a pool. I saw the wild hydrangeas I was nursing back to health. I saw the old gazebo I planned to fix next spring. No, I said again, louder this time. But I knew a no wouldn't stop them. Victor didn't hear no. He heard negotiate harder. I needed to be ready. I went to my small home office, a converted pantry, and opened my laptop. I started a new folder. I named it War. 2 days passed. I worked in the garage, keeping my phone on silent. The sound of the belt sander was my therapy. I was restoring a 1920s vanity for a client, stripping away the yellowed varnish to reveal the beautiful walnut grain beneath. It was Wednesday afternoon when the shadow fell across my workbench. I didn't hear the car pull up over the noise of the sander. I turned off the machine, the sudden silence ringing in my ears. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight coming through the open bay door. Victor was standing there. He was wearing his golf attire, a pastel polo and khaki shorts that looked ridiculous surrounded by sawdust and power tools. He looked around the workshop with a sneer, wrinkling his nose at the smell of solvents. You didn't answer my calls, he said. No hello. I'm working, Dad, I said, wiping my hands on my apron. What do you want? He stepped further into the garage, careful not to touch anything dusty. We need to settle this paperwork, Sloan. The lawyers are drafting the transfer. I need you to sign the quitclaim deed by Friday. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. I told you at dinner. I'm not signing anything. It's my house. My name is on the deed. My name is on the mortgage. Victor sighed, the way one sighs at a slow child. He walked over to a stack of lumber and leaned against it, crossing his arms. See, that's where you're confused, sweetheart. We've been very patient with you playing fixer-upper, but let's be real. The money you used to buy this place. That $150,000 down payment. My savings, I said. Family funds, he corrected, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. Funds that were, let's say, allocated to you temporarily. A loan. From the family trust. My blood ran cold. That's a lie. I worked 3 jobs. I waited tables. I did freelance carpentry. I saved every penny for 6 years. Can you prove it? Victor tilted his head. Can you prove every cash tip? Every under-the-table job? Because we have records. We have witnesses, your mother, your uncle, who will testify that you agreed it was a loan. A verbal contract. And now, the family is calling in the loan. I stared at him. The gaslighting was so audacious it was almost impressive. He was rewriting history in real time. You're going to sue me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You're going to sue your own daughter to take her home. We don't want to sue, Sloane, he said, feigning sympathy. It's ugly. It's public. But if you force our hand. Yes. We will sue for constructive trust. We will allege theft and embezzlement of family funds. We will tie this property up in litigation for years. You'll go bankrupt just trying to pay the legal fees. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. Colton needs this. Don't be the villain here. Sign the deed. We'll give you $20,000 for your trouble. That's generous. I looked at his face. The face I used to look up to. There was no love there. Only calculation. My hand was in my apron pocket. My fingers were wrapped around my phone. I had pressed the side button 3 times, a shortcut I set up years ago for quick voice memos when I was measuring dimensions. It had vibrated once to signal it was recording. So, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady, to sound defeated. Just to be clear. If I don't give Colton the house, you'll lie to a court and say I stole the money to buy it. Victor smiled. It was a shark's smile. It's not a lie if we win, Sloane. It's just business. You have until Friday. He turned and walked out of the garage, the sunlight swallowing him. I stood there for a long time, listening to the recording on loop. It's not a lie if we win. I wasn't the villain. But I wasn't the victim anymore, either. The law offices of Harrow, O'Malley and Stein were on the 40th floor of a glass tower downtown. The waiting room smelled like money, not the old, dusty money of my parents' country club, but sharp, modern, aggressive money. I sat on a leather chair that probably cost more than my first car, clutching a manila folder. I felt small. My best blazer felt cheap. I kept picking at a hangnail on my thumb. Miss Sloane. I looked up. The woman standing there was terrifying. She was in her 50s, silver hair cut in a razor-sharp bob, wearing a suit that looked like armor. This was Miss Harrow. I had found her name on a Reddit forum about inheritance disputes. They called her the Shredder. I followed her into her office. The view was breathtaking, the city spread out like a circuit board below. Sit, she said. She didn't offer coffee. She didn't make small talk. You said on the phone your parents are threatening a constructive trust suit. Yes, I said, sliding the letter Victor had sent over the desk. It had arrived this morning, drafted by his golf buddy's law firm. And they want me to sign this quitclaim deed by tomorrow. Ms. Harrow put on a pair of glasses and read the letter. The room was silent except for the hum of the HVAC. I held my breath. I expected her to tell me I was screwed. I expected her to tell me that rich men like Victor always win. She read the second page. Then she stopped. A sound bubbled up from her throat. It was a laugh. Not a polite chuckle, but a deep, genuine, belly laugh. She took off her glasses and wiped a tear from her eye. "I'm sorry," she said, though she didn't look sorry. This is adorable." I blinked. Adorable? They want to take my home. Honey, she leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with predatory delight. They are threatening to sue for a constructive trust based on a verbal agreement from 5 years ago. In this state. Without a single bank transfer receipt from them to you. She tossed the letter back onto the desk like it was trash. This isn't a lawsuit. It's a bluff. A bad one. It's written by a real estate attorney who clearly hasn't stepped inside a litigation courtroom since 1990. The relief that washed over me was so intense I almost cried. So. I'm safe. Ms. Harrow's face went serious. The laughter vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating intensity. Safe? Yes. But they won't stop. Bullies like this don't stop because you say no. They stop when you break their nose. She looked at me, really looked at me, taking in my rough hands, the exhaustion in my eyes, the years of being made to feel small. Do you want them to just go away, Sloane? Or do you want to make sure they can never come back? I thought about the way Victor sneered at my workshop. I thought about Colton laughing as he broke my things. I thought about the recording on my phone. I want them to stop haunting me, I said. I want to burn the bridge so thoroughly they can't even see the smoke. Ms. Harrow smiled. It was terrifying. Good. Then let's get to work. I need access to everything. Your bank records, and, do you have any idea about your family's actual finances? Because people desperate enough to steal a house usually leave a trail of crumbs. I have something better, I said, pulling out my phone. I have a recording. For the next week, I lived a double life. By day, I was the terrified daughter, hiding in my house, not answering the door when Colton came banging on it. By night, I was sitting in Ms. Harrow's conference room, dissecting the autopsy of my family's lies. Ms. Harrow was a bloodhound. She didn't just look at my finances, she triggered a forensic audit of the family trust Victor kept mentioning. Since Victor had claimed the money I used was family trust money, he had inadvertently opened the door for Ms. Harrow to subpoena the trust's records to verify the claim. It was Tuesday evening. We were surrounded by boxes of paper. Ms. Harrow was clicking through a spreadsheet on her laptop. "Sloane," she said. Her voice was quiet. "Come look at this." I walked around the desk. "You said your grandmother, Nana Rose, left a trust, but it was lost in the market crash, right?" "That's what Dad said." "Bad investments." "Look at the dates," she pointed a manicured finger at the screen. I squinted. The trust fund, Nana Rose's legacy, had a balance of $400,000 at the time of her death. "Here is the withdrawal," Harrow said. "Dated 3 days after your 18th birthday. The entire amount. Withdrawn in a single lump sum." "But I never signed for that," I whispered. "I was 18. I was finishing high school. I never saw a check." "Exactly," Harrow pulled up a scanned document. "Look at the signature. It was my name. But it wasn't my handwriting. The S was looped, fancy. My S is sharp, printed." "That's Deidre's handwriting," I said, my stomach churning. "She signed my name." "Forgery," Harrow stated flatly. "And look where the money went." She traced the transaction path. It didn't go into stocks. It didn't go into bonds. It went to a luxury car dealership. Then a contractor for a kitchen remodel at my parents' house. And a massive transfer to a casino in Las Vegas to settle a debt under Colton's name. The room spun. They didn't just lose the money. They stole it. They stole my inheritance the moment I became an adult, used it to buy Colton a Porsche and fix their kitchen, and then spent a decade telling me I was poor and useless. And now that they were broke again, they were coming for the only thing I had built myself. This changes everything, Harrow said, leaning back. This isn't just a defense case anymore. This is fraud. This is grand larceny. And since they didn't pay gift taxes on this transfer, it's also tax evasion. I looked at the screen. The numbers blurred. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my chest. I wasn't sad anymore. The part of me that was the little girl wanting Daddy's approval died in that office. What do we do? I asked. Ms. Harrow opened a new document. We draft the nuclear option. We prepare a countersuit. But we don't file it yet. We let them walk into the trap. The silence from my end was driving them insane. Ms. Harrow's strategy was simple: starve them. No texts. No calls. No opening the door. My phone became a battlefield. Colton, voicemail, Sloan, pick up. Don't be a bitch. Dad is losing it. Just sign the papers, we can work out a payment plan for you later. Aunt Linda, flying monkey, Sloan, your mother is sick with worry. How can you do this to the family? After everything they've done for you. I archived them all. Every message went into the evidence folder. The harassment escalated. On Thursday night, I woke up to the sound of crashing in the front yard. I peeked through the blinds. It was Colton. He was drunk. He had driven his BMW onto my lawn, crushing the hydrangeas I had planted. He was stumbling around, kicking at my porch steps. It's mine, he was screaming at the house. It's supposed to be mine. I'm the eldest. He looked pathetic. He wasn't the golden child anymore. He was a termite. A pest that consumed everything around him because he couldn't create anything himself. I didn't call the police. I just stood there, in the dark, recording him through the window. I realized then that I wasn't afraid of him. I used to be. I used to think he was powerful. But he was just a man who couldn't stand on his own 2 feet. He eventually passed out on my porch swing. I went back to bed and slept better than I had in years. Friday morning came. The deadline Victor had set. My phone rang. It was Miss Harrow. They've reached out, she said. Victor's lawyer called mine. They are claiming you are being uncooperative and hostile. They want a final settlement meeting before they file the lawsuit on Monday. What do we do? I asked, sipping my coffee. They want to meet tonight. At their house. A family dinner. They think if they get you in that room, outnumbered, they can bully you into signing. I'm not going back there, I said, my hand instinctively tightening on the mug. You have to, Harrow said. But not alone. I'm coming with you. And I'm bringing the file. Why meet them? Why not just file the countersuit? Because, Harrow's voice was sharp. If we file, it takes months. If we walk in there and show them the jugular vein we're about to cut, they will fold tonight. We end this tonight, Sloan. Total capitulation. I looked around my kitchen. The sunlight was hitting the breakfast nook I had built. Okay, I said. Let's finish it. I dressed carefully. No work clothes. I wore a sharp black dress and heels. I put on makeup. I wasn't going as the carpenter. I was going as the executioner. The dining room was exactly as I had left it weeks ago, except the tension was thick enough to choke on. Victor sat at the head of the table. Deidre was to his right, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Colton sat slumped, looking hungover, nursing a Bloody Mary. Paige was there, looking terrified and confused. I walked in. Miss Harrow walked in a step behind me, carrying a sleek leather briefcase. "Who is this?" Victor barked, standing up. I said family only. "This is my counsel, Miss Harrow," I said, taking my seat. I didn't tremble. My hands were steady. "You threatened legal action. I brought a lawyer." "Sit down, Victor," Miss Harrow said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had the weight of a falling anvil. Victor sat. "Let's make this quick," Victor snarled, pushing a document across the table. "This is the quitclaim deed. Sign it, and we forget this ugly episode. We won't press charges for the misappropriation of the trust funds you stole." Paige gasped. "Sloan stole money." I looked at Paige. "I didn't steal. I restored." "Enough lies." Deidre cried out, slamming her hand on the table. "We raised you. We gave you everything. And you steal from your brother." Miss Harrow didn't speak. She just opened her briefcase. She took out a small Bluetooth speaker and set it in the center of the table. "What is that?" Colton sneered. Miss Harrow pressed play. Victor's voice filled the room, clear and arrogant. "It's not a lie if we win, Sloan. We will allege theft and embezzlement. You'll go bankrupt just trying to pay the legal fees." The color drained from Victor's face. It was instant. He went from red to gray in 3 seconds. That was a private conversation," he stammered. "Recorded in a one-party consent state," Miss Harrow said smoothly. "Admissible in court as evidence of extortion and malicious prosecution." She didn't stop there. She pulled out a stack of papers. "And regarding the theft of funds." Harrow slid the bank records across the table to Paige. "Paige, you might want to read that. It's the forensic trail of the Nana Rose Trust." Paige picked up the paper. Her eyes widened. "Forgery," Harrow declared, pointing at Deidre. "Grand larceny. And tax fraud. You stole $400,000 from Sloan when she was 18. You spent it on cars and renovations." "That's not true." Deidre shrieked, but her eyes were darting around the room, looking for an exit. "It is true," I said. "And we have the IRS forms ready to mail." Harrow placed one final document on the table. "This is a settlement agreement. It states that you acknowledge the debt you owe Sloan. It places a lien on your house, this house, to repay the stolen trust fund with interest. And it permanently waives any claim to Sloan's property." "You can't do this," Colton whispered. "I need that house. I have debts, bad debts." "Not my problem," I said coldly. "If you don't sign," Harrow said, checking her watch. "I file the fraud report with the district attorney and the IRS tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. You will go to prison." "Victor, Deidre, prison. Not a country club. Prison." The silence that followed was absolute. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked. Tick. Tock. Victor looked at the document. He looked at me. He saw no fear. He saw only the reflection of his own ruin. He picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so hard he could barely write. The sound of Victor signing his life away was the quietest sound I'd ever heard. As soon as the ink was dry, Paige stood up. She took off the massive diamond engagement ring, which I now knew was probably bought with credit, and dropped it into Colton's drink. It made a dull plunk. "I'm going to my mother's," she said. She didn't look back. Colton put his head in his hands and started to sob. Not for the loss of Paige, but for the loss of his safety net. We took the papers and left. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing left to say. 6 months later. The morning air was crisp. I sat on my back porch, the one I had rebuilt plank by plank, drinking coffee. The garden was finally coming back to life. The hydrangeas Colton had crushed were blooming again, resilient little things. It had been a quiet 6 months. Victor and Deidre had sold their house. They had to. Between the repayment of my trust fund, with interest, and the fines they owed the IRS after Ms. Harrow, anonymously, tipped them off anyway about some other discrepancies, they were wiped out. They were living in a 2-bedroom condo in a cheaper part of town. Colton was working at a car rental agency. He texted me once, asking for a loan. I blocked the number. The check for the trust fund repayment had cleared last week. I didn't buy a car. I didn't go on vacation. I put it right back into the house. I was restoring the attic now. I ran my hand along the wooden railing of the porch. It was solid. It held my weight. I thought about the question that had kept me awake for the first few weeks. Was I cruel? They were my parents. They were my flesh and blood. I had watched them crumble and I hadn't lifted a finger to stop it. Yesterday, Deidre sent a letter. No text, she couldn't afford the data plan maybe. It was a handwritten note, asking if I had a spare room, because the condo was cramped. I didn't open a reply. I threw the letter into the fireplace in the living room. I watched the paper curl and blacken, the words turning to ash and floating up the chimney. Does that make me cold? Maybe. But as I watched the smoke rise, disappearing into the clear blue sky, I didn't feel cold. I felt warm. I felt light. You cannot build a future on a rotten foundation. Sometimes, you have to let the whole thing collapse so you can build something real on top of the ruins. I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted like freedom. So, here is my question to you, Preston. Sorry, Colton is currently sleeping on a friend's couch. My parents are likely going to spend the rest of their lives paying off debts. They say family is everything, and that I should have sacrificed my hard work to save them. Did I go too far? Or did I finally give them exactly what they earned? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed seeing justice served cold, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. I have a lot more stories to tell, and trust me, the walls of this house have heard everything.